went to my window and I saw a Hamrich truck. It said on the side of it, Detroit Water Collections Project. And I headed outside knowing that was going to tell them they could not shut off my water. And they left. It was just that easy. But then they proceeded to head down my block and systematically go house to house and shut my neighbors off, one by one. When they got a little bit further down the block at my 86-year-old neighbor's home and went to shut her off, I went down to plead with them. They just ignored me and proceeded.
I'm going to just bring the paperwork down to show you that I'm not lying. This is the bill they had the audacity to send me. Now this is what they say I owe, or this house owe. They told me that I had to bring a statement from my doctor telling them why I needed the water, and it was an emergency. I gave them what the doctor gave me.
Why do you have to have a doctor's note?
People know they cannot pay and not get shut off, they won't pay. And I think it's essential to go through this process of shutting off people who are so delinquent.
The longest I've gone without running water at one time has been 8 weeks. I'm like, my water bill is $5,000. How is this $5,000? I'm contacting the water department on several occasions, so I would like to be accurate. July 8th, I went to the Randolph office, and I was there from 8 a.m. to 1:45 p.m. And on July 23rd, I made several calls, and I was on hold for several hours, and then they just hung up on me. Then on the 25th of July, I was at the Randolph office again, and I was there for about 3.5 hours, and I was told that they had no field investigation on record. And then on August 4th, I went back to the DWSD office on Grand River, and I was outside from about 9:30 to about 2:57 p.m. Waiting in line, and got nothing accomplished.
We can say water's a right. Go down that river and pick up a bucket of water. That's your right.
Welcome to my loft.
I think that you should pay your water bill.
Yeah, I think that's fair. You think if you don't pay your bill, then you should get it shut off.
Like, if I can't pay for something, I don't get it. I want to know their spending habits and what they're buying and what their money is going towards. Like, are they showering for 3 hours a day? Are they unnecessarily using the water?
Shock in describing the racial makeup of Detroit and its surrounding communities is probably not the right word, just because I, like so many, have lived with it for 30 years. And so there's no shock value to it. Is it disturbing? Absolutely, it is disturbing.
I was paying on my water bill every month, averaging between $175 to $225, maybe $300.
It's so sad too. I mean, this woman came in, her water had been shut off, and she's got this flyer that has, all these different numbers for the what's called DRAP, the Detroit Residential Water Assistance Program. All these phone numbers. She's like, I'm going to call these people. I sat down, I called all the numbers. Each one was disconnected. The illusion is being created that there's help available. And it's just a lie. It's just a big lie.
Again, the city is willing to work with you if you can set up a payment plan, but it is up to you to contact the city to get the ball rolling. I'm Local 4 Defender Hank Winchester, back to you.
If you get your water cut off, you're going to leave that house. I can walk down these streets and you can hear water running out of these abandoned houses.
The water is down there to the window of the basement. We got 2 houses on the end of the corner down here. Water ran for 2 years straight, and we kept calling the city every day to turn the water off. But they can come turn your water off if you only behind 1 month.
The sewage system, it backs up. Taking away the infrastructure is a good way to move people out of a place, to devalue their property, to make people think less about their neighborhood.
Generally in the Northeast Detroit, we feel that this area has been targeted for return to nature, if you will.
On Helen Street, we've had problems with street drains being blocked up like everybody else has. We called this in March. We've done follow-up calls. The water department won't give us a date. All right, ready. Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Okay.
Got a football, crate.
Maybe we'll have to do a little bit of what the water department should have done. Let's see what we got here. Nice crate.
I guess we want some control in our neighborhood. We want to be able to set some terms for its future that nobody else in the city is trying to focus on right now. Retirees using their retiree funds.
Yeah, I've seen this neighborhood deteriorate a whole lot. Why? Chase, Colwell, it's got a lot to do with what happened in the neighborhood. And, we know what happened. We understand. I mean,
it's a big brick. It probably worked its way to the main, and the pressure on it caused some damage to it. But it's no biggie. We'll just keep digging till we get to the problem. This particular hole, you know, there's no firm ground around. It's kind of dangerous. It needs to be replaced, but the city don't have the money to do it, so we'll just keep patching them up.
Do you think that it's possible that the money that the city used to shut off the water could have been put to use in rebuilding the infrastructure?
I think that's a simplistic way to look at it. We're moving forward.
State and federal governments have withdrawn their financial support over the last couple of decades, and that means Detroit has had to issue bonds. And so it becomes very important that the bond rating is sufficiently high to allow those cities to market their bonds.
Detroit is burning. Detroit is engulfed in an orgy of arson. It's a holiday tradition, sort of like a mean-spirited Mardi Gras.
As long as they can market those bonds, investors are out there and willing to buy those bonds, then the city keeps afloat, literally, on a year-to-year basis.
You come here and you get the feeling that this is what the end of the road looks like.
That's not what this is. That's the narrative.
Outsiders should take a close look at Detroit and wonder, could it happen here?
If the bond rating agencies, for whatever reason, lower those bond ratings and label them junk bonds or the equivalent, investors shy away. When Mayor Coleman Young was elected in 1974, he showed fiscal responsibility, he trimmed the city workforce, he did all the things that you were supposed to do, and that the bond rating agencies had told him to do. And then lo and behold, the rating went down anyway.
The population of Detroit is shrinking from 2 million in the 50s to about 970,000 people today.
And so understandably, I think Young was outraged, and he protested to the bond rating agencies, and their response was that their demographic projections indicated that because of what they saw as continued population loss, that the city was going to be in a really bad state down the road, And despite everything that he had done, it just didn't matter.
They'll almost certainly mean big financial losses, additional big financial losses for Detroit.
And of course, Young's response to that was, what else can I do?
A larger percentage of the water department's budget goes toward debt service than it does toward operations and maintenance.
No matter, if our customers become ultra-conservative, we still have a debt service that we have to pay.
I learned how, as grotesque as it sounds, to recycle water. I buy generally these big 2.5 gallon, 3 gallon jugs. I'll cook something that I can boil that doesn't use all the water. And that way I can take the water from whatever I cooked and use it to wash dishes. And then I can take the dish water and use it to flush the toilet.
It's a big market because the people who created the suburbs are young adults.
When it's hammer time in the city, it's tea time in the suburbs. There are now more offices here than in Detroit. More stores, too, so there's no reason to go to the city. The only thing the suburbs lack are blacks.
Right now, the department has leaned itself in terms of its employees. Probably a couple of years ago, the department was over 2,000 employees. Right now, we're under 1,600 employees.
So what are we going to do to make up for this income that we can't get anymore? I know what. Why don't we lay off city workers? That'll fix it. How's that going to fix it? German people could not have slaughtered Jewish folks in the numbers that they had done unless the propaganda had gone out years and years and years in advance. There's something the matter with these Jewish people.
Crime and corruption have pushed people out of Detroit.
Detroit has been on the top 10 list of the most violent cities in 24 of the last 27 years.
So once you start incinerating grandma and grandpa, then folks will say, well, I heard these things about them.
Pure incompetence and mismanagement, and certainly corruption played a role. They put themselves in a trick bag they couldn't get out of.
And you have to say that over and over and over and over again.
We had a financial review team come do an analysis and look at what's been going on in the city. I appreciate the efforts of the mayor and the city council to solve the problem, but it wasn't enough.
We are being appointed an overseer or a king.
I'm relatively comfortably ensconced in my petite bourgeoisie existence as a law firm partner at a large corporate law firm. And judging from the amount of tropical weight wool I see in the audience and silk ties, I'm speaking to my brethren. I decided that it was a call to service.
I hope to address the concerns immediately with the delivery of services and public safety.
You know, they get a special contractor to come in, and then they start shutting off, you know, thousands and thousands and thousands of homes.
You can't say and do bad things to welfare recipients unless you put a narrative out there. They would rather pay for cable than water.
And I haven't spent a whole lot of time focusing on a retrospective of why, who, what, where, when. There's enough fingers to point. There's enough attribution. There's enough blame. You know, this represents some of a homecoming for me, both figuratively and literally. As I look across the room at so many people that I've known throughout the arc of my career, my ex-law firm, Jones Day, with who we've been in the trenches on many battles with, and some of my investment bankers that are here on this matter at Miller Buckfire.
Bank of America, one of its subsidiaries, and UBS are both clients of Jones Day. And so, you know, you have Jones Day negotiating on behalf of the city with its clients.
Dear Judge Rhodes.
Dear Honorable Judge Rhodes.
I'm writing this letter as a concerned retiree of the city of Detroit.
I'm writing you to let you know a little bit about my situation.
Your Honor, I worked for the city of Detroit for 39 years, and with the understanding that my pension was protected by state constitution.
Cutting my pension check again would literally put me on the streets.
Detroit will have another unoccupied home.
I'm now owing more to the mortgage company than my home is worth.
I am barely hanging on to my home, as my home is worth about 2/3 of what I owe on the house. I have never understood how the retirees have been grouped in with banks as creditors.
But the thing about bankruptcy that's so beautiful is we don't ask why. We don't ask whose fault it was. We give you a fresh start.
It's almost as though we're in Roman days when folks were surrounded by coliseums and sport and entertainment. That's what their government delivered to them, when everything else was collapsing around them.
On behalf of the 120,000 families who are getting their water turned off, we're following the crews and turning the water back on.
Mike, shut the street down!
Shut the street down! Shut the street down! Shut the street down! Shut the street down!
We were writing the mayor, which would be Michael Duggan.
The Department of Water and Sewer is under the emergency manager.
We were writing every elected official. We were writing them all. We were calling them all. Never heard a word back from them. Hit the phone on the table to see what's the matter with the telephone, because it's not working. It's not ringing. Nobody's calling us back.
I want to tell you what 6 kids on this porch when they came to shut off the water, and their parents had to run to try to find how they're going to pay their water bill. Another woman, she's pregnant, she has a 2-year-old. She's holding the bill for $400 in her hand, and she's begging the man, don't turn off my water. A pregnant woman with a $400 bill. You're going to close the water off for a woman with a $400 bill who's pregnant and a 2-year-old. Shame on you.
How has the department been responding to this?
Money for water, not for cameras!
Status quo, business as usual.
And it was our friends from Canada that wrote to the United Nations to say, what the hell is going on in Detroit? The Special Rapporteur for Water wrote a response on the United Nations website that said something along the lines of, we're deeply concerned about the water problems as they are occurring in Detroit. And her putting that letter, that message of concern, made the world pow!
Thousands of people have been left without any water. I want to bring in Hank Winchester, a reporter who has been covering this story from the very beginning from NBC affiliate WDIV there in Detroit. How many people are at risk in Detroit's water crisis here, Hank?
Oh, Craig, we're talking about thousands of people and the number growing every day. And this is where it gets controversial, who simply don't want to pay the water bill, who'd rather spend money on cable.
And I thought, oh God, what can I do? He's not here. If he'd been here, I would have just pimp slapped him.
We'll turn you back on, but you simply can't ignore the water department.
Shame on Hank. Shame on him for putting that lie and that and that disinformation out on the air.
Maureen,
to suggest that people don't want to pay for a water bill is scandalous. So I dusted him upside one side of the street and the other. You know, tell that lie. You know, and it's people like you to keep that narrative going. What is at stake here,
Maureen,
young man?
you don't believe that there are people that don't want to pay the bill?
I'm answering the question. What is at stake here is that there are tens of thousands of low-income families.
We've made it very clear from day one. We understand, and of course I understand as a reporter who worked in this city for 14 years.
And you've talked to these people. People have said to you, you know what, I've got the money, I just don't want to pay for water.
Right. I mean, we've heard stories.
I'm not coming back on any other programs anymore unless there's an opportunity and a time to speak from the voices of low-income people. Let's have some truth and a fair exchange as opposed to Hank, who doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. Gobble up all the time. I'll talk to you later. By the time I got home, and I told my son, I said, this seems to be a big deal. He said it went viral. I said, well, what's viral mean? He said it went all over the earth. How would people know to watch this? He says that's what's happening. I said, I think I'm just going to go into bed now because I'm not sure what this is. And it seems to be something going on beyond my capacity to understand it.
It simply is not good business to send a bill to someone knowing that that person can't afford to pay that.
Free Press interviewed some of you a few weeks ago and found not one of you had your water terminated. This is according to the Free Press, the interview. What does that mean? Let me finish. Not one person who has demonstrated a legitimate affordability problem has been denied water service by DWSD. There have been instances even.
That is not true.
That is true. Let me finish.
We're talking about people who pay based on their income. Every single person who lives in this city wants to pay their water bill. So all of these lies that are going on about people don't want to pay their bills, that's nonsense.
It's prohibited by state law. By state law, DWSD can only charge cost of service. And if it implemented an affordability rate, it would be sued immediately, the next day, by Oakland County and many other suburban wholesale customers.
On August the 2nd, we are having an affordability fair, inviting anyone who has a problem paying their bill to come to our East Side Center, and we will make sure you're entered into a program or receive some type of benefit so your water is not discontinued.
Probably just on our 3-block stretch, a dozen to 15 houses got shut off without notice. See marks like this on the street. You look down here on the sidewalk. Those bright blues. That means the water was just cut off. 34 got cut off too, but there's not a mark on her. Oh, here. They obviously did damage to the box while they were doing this.
They do that from keeping the customer from
because
service.
They're not professionals. They're contractors that aren't paid to take care of the property. they're there to get their fee for doing a cutoff. Contract is, they're getting paid $2 million this year and almost $4 million next year, $3.5 million next year to just do water cutoffs. Professionally, they're a wrecking company.
This was a nonviolent, peaceful protest to show our displeasure. Water is a human right. No one should ever get deprived
Children's water.
of water.
Water is a human right. Stop the shutoffs now. Water is a human right. Stop the shutoffs now.
This is just a little step and the big step that we're going to have to take to stop these shutoffs.
We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved just like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved.
So the water PR guys are saying that we're preventing water, by this action we're preventing water from being turned on. But of course,
That's what they're claiming to the media.
Kidding?
The work orders today were all to go out and turn people's water on, and we're preventing them from going out and turning people's water on.
Right.
The police came.
Water is a human right. We shall not be moved. Water is a human right. We shall not be moved. Good job,
And they arrested me. First they took me up to the bus. And I guess they decided they couldn't get me in the bus, and they took me over and put me in a van.
Come on, hurry up, fellas, let's go.
There was not enough room for me to sit up straight in my chair. My head was bent over.
Watch his head, watch his head.
Touching up against the ceiling. They did not strap my wheelchair down. They put a plainclothes officer in the back of the van, and he used his foot to brace my chair.
Hi, I'm from Michigan Welfare Rights, and I just want to get your opinion. What do you think we should do about the water situation, about the water shutoff?
I've been with the city since 2003, and I'm not even making $11.
I had estimated bills ever since last year when I first moved into this house. My bill was at $1,000 already.
My landlord didn't pay my water bill for about a year.
The fact that the city continues to insist that the Headley Amendment prohibits them from going forward because the amount that would be charged for an affordability plan amounts to a tax is simply not true.
Not only is it a legal mistake, right? It's against the backdrop of a humanitarian crisis, right, and a public health emergency where tens of thousands of citizens are having their water shut off.
It is possible and perfectly legal to fund a water affordability plan in the same way that the Detroit Water and Sewerage Department fund the rates and structure the rates today.
Ticket number 203.
If you have an affordability plan that allows people to pay what they can pay, you get a lot more money than you would get if you just sort of wrote them off and shut their water off.
Objectors to the affordability plan have obstinately refused to design an affordability system.
Last call for 203.
We needed to file a lawsuit
filed a constitutional challenge to the manner in which the water was being turned off. We know for sure there was no determination, no criterion set up for whether or not there was a senior in the home, disabled persons, children, or anyone who needed water for their medical care. We are filing, and we have filed, a temporary restraining order with the court that will be heard on September 2nd.
As we go door to door, what we're finding is people have been without water from anywhere from 6 months to a year. There will be thousands of our pensioners that are going to be wretched down into poverty, and they are going to experience not having water.
One of the shut-off families had a senior who was being fed through a tube through the stomach. This was an admission that later led Judge Rhodes to say, yeah, there is a health issue here.
The court must conclude that a customer whose water service is discontinued does likely suffer irreparable harm, especially if the service is lost for more than a few days. These harms include the risk of serious and even life-threatening medical conditions, as well as adverse consequences in employment, in family and personal relations, and for children in their education. It cannot be doubted that water is a necessary ingredient for sustaining life.
A just and compassionate society would not shut off water, a basic necessity of life, to a family simply because they haven't paid if their failure to pay is due to an inability to pay. There's really nothing more to my belief set than that.
These findings about the irreparable harm that customers may suffer upon termination of their water service does not suggest that there is a fundamental enforceable right to free or affordable water. There is no such right in law, just as there is no such affordable right to other necessities of life, such as shelter, food, or medical care. Turning now to the harm that the city might experience if the requested relief is granted, the court must conclude that it would be significant. The court finds substantial merit in the city's concern that a 6-month injunction against terminations would increase its customer default rate and seriously threaten its revenues. Detroit cannot afford any revenue slippage, and its obligations to its creditors requires it to take all reasonable and businesslike measures to collect the debts that are owed to it.
And the judge ruled against us.
The last thing it needs is this hit to its revenues.
This was in the face of Judge Rhodes' finding that irreparable harm could occur.
Within months of the bankruptcy taking effect, and all those debts are now, just trash on the floor.
And the financial emergency in the city of Detroit will be defined as wrapping up today. So it's truly historic.
The biggest chunk of people's water bills is not to maintain pipes or clean the water or to clean the sewage as it's going out. It is to service debt. But that debt did not get reduced 1 penny in bankruptcy because it's considered secured debt, and secured debt is off the table. And so it was okay to cut people's pensions. It's okay to take away people's retirees' pensions, cut retirees, take away retirees' health care plans, and give them a $125 a month stipend. That was okay, even though the Michigan Constitution says that public employee pensions shall remain whole. Bankruptcy court decided that didn't apply. It could overrule that and go after their pensions, go after their health care benefits. But these water bonds were sacrosanct. They couldn't go after those at all.
coming to cut my water off. The water bill is $2,000. They don't want to accept $200. That's how much I get paid every week. They want me to pay 33%, that's $700, $800. I don't have that much money. And my wife, she's pregnant. What are you supposed to do? What we do? People pay their bills, and they don't want to do it for no reason. So we're gonna stay here and stop them. They like it or not.
Okay. That's their job. I have nothing to do with it.
This tree belongs to the city. It's breaking my roof. They don't want to fix it. I have to fix it for my own bucket.
Sewage is coming up out of that thing.
All the way to the basement. Now they want me to pay for the water.
Now, why am I involved in that? How is that my issue? What I'm here for is
to make sure the pregnant wife's water gets shut off. Good.
I'm here to protect everybody.
No, you're not protecting a woman who's pregnant right now.
You protect them by going to work. How's that?
I'm working, but
no, you need to call the mayor. I'm in the middle, okay? Call the mayor is what you need to do.
There are very few people in this town who actually don't have water. But if you've got an individual case, we've made special charity interventions for people in dire circumstances.
Your assistance plan last year had 24,000 people enrolled in it, and 300 were able to make the payment.
A report we had in today of a pregnant woman whose water was cut off during Ramadan. I mean, these are really emergency situations.
If you do not pay your water bill, they will turn off the water.
Very seldom, if ever, that I know of, they do any research or ask any questions. Are there any children or anyone living in these homes with special needs? Is there any way that we can put anything in place?
We put the door hanger on the door.
But there are still 148,000 customers that are 60 days or more past due. We want money going into the system too.
When we turn off people's water, we're in effect increasing what those of us who pay in pay.
I'm really appreciative of having all these folks coming in here without bringing a single cent to help. Yes, go ahead.
I'm a member of We the People of Detroit, which provides emergency water relief for the more than 80% of people who can't afford to stay on the payment plans that you have provided.
Good for you. I don't care if the water people keep talking. If I'm staying and answering every question.
Cops don't show up at all. You guys remember
Wow.
There was a shootout out here. Nobody came.
Third cop. Hello. How many cops are
There's 4 cops. And what is that football going to do? Look at that, Tony. Tony, look at that football. Huh? Tony, look at that football. You got the whole video?
Yeah.
You got it? Alright, good.
I think I got some of it.
You got it? You got it.
When we exited bankruptcy, we borrowed $275 million from Barclays. One of the things we committed to do was to help them sell those bonds to the public. There's only 3 rating agencies that rate such things. Mr. Latimer takes no pleasure in shutting anybody's water off that can't afford to pay for it. But those bondholders, they really look at actions like this to show that we're being financially responsible, even though we totally realize it's hard on people when we raise rates. We don't do it easily. None of these people do.
But at the same time that we need to be fiscally responsible, do we become fiscally responsible and create a bigger hole where we have, hey, we got a great credit rating, but we've got 500,000 more people without water?
One of the charities my wife and I believe in the most in this area is Thaw. When we give our money, that's really our #1 charity. And what I love about Thaw that organization really figures out who really needs help and what's the best way to do it.
It was never clear to me that the assets that were being marshaled to address this problem were sufficient assets. And I was concerned about that. I was concerned about that because what would happen to these residents who need water if all of these different organizations who were making resources available ran out of resources?
It was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen in my life.
We're trying to get help for people who are trying to get their water bills paid off.
Our assistance program for the water is closed until approximately mid-August. The demand here is extreme.
Yeah.
From what I can tell, the city is doing amazingly well. I'm very pleased with how the city is doing. And financially, it's doing better than we had projected in the bankruptcy.
Go ahead. Keep talking. I'm going to encourage Judge Rhodes to answer the question, and because I don't have anything left to give you. Go ahead. Go ahead, please.
If you'll give me just a second here,
yeah.
I'm actually going to agree with those in the audience.
Okay, thank you.
Quiet. I'm going to agree with those of you who in the audience.
Go ahead.
I'm going to agree with those of you in the audience who are concerned that we contracted democracy in the city of Detroit.
Yes.
We did that.
Yes.
We had an emergency manager who displaced the mayor and the city council.
Yes.
It was important to do that on a temporary basis in order to fix the city.
Okay.
It's not unlike going into the hospital when you're sick.
Yes.
You lose some of your rights.
Come on. We need to wrap up here. If you had actually been listening to the judge's response, you might have actually liked it.
Well, I think Detroit is much better off after the bankruptcy, absolutely. We're seeing streetlights, we're seeing demolition, we're seeing property values go up, so I think it's much, much better.
It appears that the city is better off.
Understand full well the limitations of trying to use the legal system to actually force change in this country. The city of Detroit is highly motivated to prevent these defendants from being able to present the broadest possible scope of evidence that will allow this to come to light, precisely how seriously the lives and well-being of the community has been threatened by these unprecedented and unconstitutional water shutoffs that have.
When we undertook this action blocking the trucks, the water shutoff trucks at Homrick, the city of Detroit was under emergency management, non-elected government. There were no legal recourses to democratic process except a jury. It was at the time the last vestige of democracy.
Hi, Ms. Hill, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
Good. I just have one question. How did you live without water for 2 months?
Honestly?
Yeah.
Like an animal. Like an animal. That's how I lived. You learn how to do things that you would never expect to go on in what is considered a civilized nation. You learn how to do things like recycle water. The first thing you do is stop drinking because... Judge, I have to object.
Okay.
Sustain. Next question.
Well, that's Yeah, that is my question, so if I can't ask that, then...
Well, she's already indicated she lived like an animal.
But,
okay, and
okay.
so, and then you recycle water. What else did you do?
You stop eating certain types of foods because you have to use water to cook them and it evaporates, and therefore you can't recycle.
Judge, I have to object.
All right. Any other questions?
No, I have no other questions.
Overruled. Any other? Okay, thank you, witness. Cross-examination.
What I want to ask you to do is to not get caught up in that emotion. And I want you all just to take a step back and let's just look at the facts of the case. Homrick was unable to get a full day's worth of work done. The defense's own exhibits showed that. The water shutoffs went down, the blight demolition went down, water turn-ons went down. Nobody is arguing that water is not important. That's not why we're here.
Okay, on the defense table, who's going to say first?
Thank you, Your Honor. Bill Wiley Kellerman. 3,000 a week they were trying to do. The prosecutor says that's irrelevant. Those numbers have people and lives and houses and children behind them. That's irrelevant. You've heard other things we tried to do. Attempts to change policy. That's irrelevant. You've heard that every elected official in the city of Detroit had been replaced by the emergency manager and had no power to respond. That's irrelevant. She would say that the meaning and spirit and the content of our action is also irrelevant, which is why we put ourselves on the stand. We wanted to try to connect our action to go on record. We went on record July 18th last year, and we're on record again today. The prosecutor says the city of Detroit is not on trial. You heard her push me this morning, and the Detroit Water and Sewage Department is not on trial. The emergency manager who ordered these is not on trial. Homrick Incorporated paid $5.2 million to do shutoffs is not on trial. I'm on trial. Marion Kramer's on trial. And I submit that at this moment in history, in Detroit, all of us are on trial.